So it seems like we have everything, right? The student has a ID, age, and name. And right now what we can do is we can just take this student entity, copy it, and put it over here. It's giving me another error. Why is that? And it's so great. I mean, never look at those errors like it's a bad thing. It's an awesome thing. Remember, it's just telling you what's wrong. Imagine if you wouldn't get all of those errors. Like for instance, if you're using JavaScript without something like TypeScript. Forget about the names, but certain, like using JavaScript, it's all over the place. I mean, you might have so many errors and things that you need to patch, and you don't even know about it. And imagine you provide your application to the client, and you don't know that you have a bunch of errors out there. And over here you have a compiler. It's telling you, hey, you're lacking something. It's in red and it's a good thing. Always look at red as a great thing. Now, we basically remember, in add student, we have exception that we're throwing, the custom exception, in case we're not going to find a teacher. So we don't want to throw it. It's not the way to go. What we want to do is want to surround it with a try and catch. And catch our custom exception here. Now the really awesome part is that here we can handle this exception specifically, but I will have to make some changes. I actually want to return, in case we have an exception, I do want to return some sort of message to the client, and I will have to return, I do want to return a response entity. The message is, remember, everything is custom in our exception, so we just get from our custom exception that we're getting, we're just going to get the message, right? And what else? We're going to get, I think I'm lacking something here. Over here we do need to add a getter for our HTTP status. Now we can actually get the HTTP status. Great. Okay, still giving me an error, and the reason is because we must return a response entity with a generic of the student. So we'll change it to this wildcard with this question mark, so we can basically return whatever. And at this point, remember, we control the case where we have an exception. Okay, so we're good to go. We can, in this case, you can add some documentation here above telling that it can return a student or it can return a string. Let's add a student and let's see if it works. So let's run the program. If you are already running it, just refresh here. Just click on refresh, restart. Let's see if we're not getting any errors. So the app is running on port 8080. I come back to my Postman over here, and I'll just change it to add student. Now in the body, this is the request body of the add student, so it's a little different. And I want to add some other name. Let's call him Bobby Lee. He's a comedian. We get rid of the subject. We don't need the subject here. And remember, the thing that we are also adding here in our JSON is a teacher ID. Okay, so we need to provide a legitimate teacher ID of a teacher that already exists. And I can search for a teacher. Remember, we have a bunch of Annas and we want to get rid of them. We want at least 2 of them. But let's add it to the first teacher, to Chris Cornell. Okay, now we have our request body, and it seems like the URL is correct. It's a post request. Let's just click on it. Teacher not found. Why it's giving me teacher not found? Let's see. Oh, I think I know what's the problem. I set it to get ID, but I need to get teacher ID and not get the ID. The ID is the student ID that we provided. So I'm just going to refresh again. Okay, so it restarted, but you see we got this message, add student, teacher not found. Okay, something is wrong there, and then we're getting this bad request 400. Okay, I will make a video specifically about HTTP requests and all the codes and all of that, but mainly there are very few codes that you need to know. But ultimately, we provided this bad request. Remember, with our custom exception. Awesome, we got our exception, and in production, it's so important to get all of these exceptions. So we try again. All right, we got an internet server error. Let's see what's up. Okay, we got this no default constructor for entity. Okay, so there are some errors here, and I want you to be aware of them because it will teach you a whole lot. So first of all, instead of using the data annotation, we're going to use 4 annotations separately. So we'll get only what we need from Lombok or to be configured in our class. In our student class and in our teacher class, what we're going to provide is setter annotation, getter annotation, no args constructor, and we're actually lacking all args constructor over here. All args constructor, and here in the student entity as well, getter, setter, no args, and all args. And the builder, we used it before, and obviously the entity. So the data will just add everything, okay? The toString, it will make sure that all the fields are in there where it's going to be problematic. So basically that was the error before, okay? Now we're not going to have this error this time. I refreshed and I'll click on send. And it tells me that it couldn't get a response and that over here I'm getting this cannot call send error after a response has been committed. And then we have this Stack Overflow here, right? Stack Overflow, if you don't know, it's basically when we have an endless recursion. Basically, we need to call another thing and another thing that is inside this other thing. That's a bad explanation, but imagine that we have a teacher, and we want to retrieve the teacher from the database, which is legitimate. And the teacher has a bunch of students, right? And every student has a teacher, and every teacher has a bunch of students. So when we just want to, all we want to do is just to retrieve one student here. I mean, nothing crazy, right? Just once we add Bobby Lee to this teacher with ID 1, all we want to do is just get this student with his teacher and nothing more. So what we want to do now is just add this JSON ignore where we have our students and edit over here where we have our teacher. So basically we added this JSON ignore annotation, and basically it's just preventing us from having this endless recursion. It's not that you did something wrong necessarily, but if you want to represent or retrieve this data in a JSON form from our database, to prevent this endless recursion, we have to add JSON ignore. So let's refresh. Again, don't be worried about all these errors. It's just, I mean, first of all, you learn from this. And also it's important for you to know about all these basic errors. So we click again and it looks like it worked. Bobby Lee was added. Now we want to make sure that it was actually correlated or associated with teacher with ID 1. We go to our MySQL workbench. So we see all the teachers here, but we care about the students now. For you to get all the students, you have this this line over here, this query, and all you have to do is put your cursor on it and click on execute statement by cursor. And okay, so it seems like I added it a few times, but again, now we're not going to actually get the error, okay, with the recursion. So it was added, and again, not good. Okay, that's not good. But the fact that Bobby Lee is actually associated with teacher ID 1 is great. Okay, and we have all the details about it. And if you want to find the teacher, it's here the first teacher with a subject of math with 0. Awesome, great. But as you can see, we can just add Bobby Lee a million times and nothing will happen. So we need to somehow filter that out. We want to make sure that let's say every name is going to be unique. Let's add a delete option to delete all those students and actually teachers. So let's delete all the students. Now remember, we need to have the student repository. And by default, there is an option to delete. Okay, and all we have to do is just provide the ID. Oh, sorry, you have to provide a student. So to get the student, so we are providing the ID, but we need to basically get the student first as an entity from our repository. So we need the student repository, find by ID, we provide the ID, and then we need to handle the case where the student is not found. So I'll just copy that because it's pretty long. And instead here, I will provide a different, okay, so we'll obviously have to change the message here. Let's say delete student, not found by ID. Great. Okay, so now we get the student, we can pass it into our delete function over here. And basically all it's going to do is just to delete the student. We'll add another one into our interface. I want to have, and I still get an error here because we need to throw this exception. And yes, I want to add it to the signature as well. And the same thing, I want to create another delete option for the teacher. It will also throw a custom exception. And we're just going to copy this one over here, change it to teacher. Here it's not going to be a student repository, it's going to be a teacher repository. And here it's just going to be a teacher. I hope you're following. If you have any questions, by the way, always feel free to ask. And over here, it's teacher repository with a small t. And we will provide the teacher here. Okay, now we need to add this to our controller. We have our way of deleting a teacher and deleting a student. So in our teacher controller, we'll finally create a delete mapping. Okay, so first of all, it's going to be public. And what do we want to do here? It's basically returning a void, but I want to return a response entity with a string. Delete, let's say student. Let's start with a student. And we're passing in, what are we passing in? We're just passing in the ID. So, okay, so it's an ID that we're passing in. That's our function. And let's add our delete mapping. We'll call it delete student. And in the end, we're going to add this ID that we're passing in by the URL. It's actually called a path variable. Okay, it's like when you have a URL and at the end you're adding in a number to get a particular instance or a particular entity out of a list of potential entities. Okay, but in this case, we're just providing the ID to delete this particular student that we want to get rid of. Okay, so all right, so first of all, we need to provide the teacher service. This is where we have all our methods, and we need to delete a student, provide the ID. Now we have a potential exception there, right? And we want to catch this exception. So we'll surround it with a catch with our custom exception. And in this case, here we're not returning a string, so we'll have to provide something. Okay, so let's return here first. New response entity with a string that everything was okay, so we added the status, and here we'll add student with ID was removed. Right? If everything is correct, we didn't get an exception over here in our delete student, this is all we're going to retrieve to the client. We're just going to give him this message. Else, in the case we have an exception, we'll return a response entity with a different string telling us that, oh wait, we have our custom exception. So all we'll have to provide is the get message and get HTTP status, which was bad request if I'm correct. Okay, so very easy, very clean, awesome. And okay, so you can add the delete teacher for yourself. Let's just use this delete function. I do get an error somewhere. Let's see what I'm getting. Okay, I didn't add over here. All right. Okay, so I'll just refresh. By the way, again, the teacher delete function, you can add it for yourself. That's like your homework. Very simple. All you have to do is just do the same with the teacher repository to remove the teacher and use the teacher service, sorry. Okay, so now let's have this delete student option, right? We called it delete student. And we need to provide an ID, because if we are not going to provide an ID and change it to delete first, let's see what's going to happen. We're getting this not found. You're going to encounter a not found a lot. Hopefully not, but you do find a lot of those. Not found, it's a 404. It's the most classic HTTP status. You see it the most when you're basically providing a URL that does not exist in a particular domain. And what we need to add here is we need to add the path variable. So let's see what we do want to delete here by ID. In our students, we have plenty of Bobby Lees. So 5, 4, 3, and 2, we definitely want to get rid of those. Okay, so let's provide 5. Student with ID 5 was removed. 4 was removed. 3 was removed. 2. Okay, let's try again with 2. After it was already removed, what are we going to get? We're going to get delete student, not found by ID, because this ID was deleted already. And if we'll go to our database again, it seems like we have only one Bobby Lee, as we should. We still have a bunch of teachers though, and I'll just get rid of it using Workbench, delete rows, and I'll click apply, awesome. Finish. So now we have only unique Annas and Chris's. So what we'll do in the next episode is we'll actually create the logic to make sure that we're only going to have unique names in our add student and add teacher. Okay, but that was that for this episode. If you liked it, go ahead and subscribe to get more videos like it. It will help me with the algorithms. That's what they say. You have a good day. Cheers.